used to be the type of person where money would give me constant feelings of stress. Whenever anybody would ask me out for a coffee or lunch, I'd avoid eye contact. My heart rate would skyrocket. And the first thing that came out of my mouth would be, that costs a little too much. Like maybe next time. Money basically controlled my life. In the past 3 years, I've been able to 12x my net worth from $40,000 to over $500,000 using these 5 habits. First of all, I'd like to disclaim that I am not a financial advisor. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I quit my job 4 years ago to go into content creation full-time. Good financial habits served as the foundation of all that allowed me to quit my job. But let's move on to habit number 1. If you take one thing away from this video and you do this, it will change your trajectory of your finances by a huge percentage, and that is to track where your money is going. Now, the 3 key metrics that I recommend tracking are net worth, savings rate, and monthly expenses. With those 3, you have a very clear snapshot of where your finances currently are, if your trajectory is going up or down, and then you have your monthly expenses so you know if you could cut something out. How can we make a map to our destination when we have no idea where we're at? We're just floating off in outer space, directionless and not oriented to our current position. So there are 2 ways that I like to do this. One is a spreadsheet and the other is an app. Now, I read in a 2014 study that said that despite there being full service tools out there like Mint or Empower, that used to be Personal Capital, or Quicken that would do all this for you, you would log in, put in all your accounts, and it would aggregate all those numbers into your net worth. But they ended up being too inconvenient, and that's exactly what the study said, is that most people ultimately fell upon doing their own spreadsheet because it was customizable. It was personalizable to their own situation, and it wasn't overly complex. And even if you use them, you still have to log in a bunch of times anyways because it will constantly log you out. So if you're doing that, you might as well just put the number in a spreadsheet and move on. There's no need to add that extra layer of a security problem that's just waiting to happen. So our Google spreadsheet or Excel spreadsheet or whatever sheet that you would like to use, you could even do it in a notebook, but it lists all the bank accounts, it lists all the credit card statement balances, it lists the mortgage, the car payment, and the current position of every retirement and investment account that we currently own. And after that, you have a number, which is net worth equals assets minus liabilities. And then month by month, you get to see that number change, and that difference is your savings rate. For personal monthly expenses, I like to use an app called a budget tracker. I'll link it down below. It's sort of generic, but it's one of the simplest apps that I found, and it doesn't require me to link any of my bank accounts. I just input a number and I track it, and that's pretty much it. Every time I get a receipt, every time I swipe my card, every time my husband spends some money, I'll just put it in and I get a number that's a tally of every expense that we've had for the month. I put in recurring expenses, so it does that automatically. It's just convenient because it's on my phone. Everything backs us up to the cloud. So those are the 2 ways that I track all these things. But by doing this, you become so much more aware of how often you spend, how much you spend, what you typically spend on. Eventually, it'll become very automatic. So the first habit increased our awareness of our spending and our money. The second one is going to be how we protect our downside and not let one single bad luck event completely wipe us out. And that is to have redundancies. Not one redundancy, but many. Redundancies act as a backup in case anything bad happens. The first layer is the emergency fund. Now, how much you put in there depends on your situation. If you have a house that has things that are decrepit and falling apart, like an AC unit or a roof, or if you live in a place with flooding damage or snowstorms, those are all things to consider when you think about how much money you need in your emergency fund. If you don't have a house, you can set aside some money for a broken car or health expenses, but this number just really depends on your own situation. Personally, I think anywhere between $20,000 to $30,000 is a really good starting point. I read a 2004 study that states that the average household thinks that they need $20,744 in savings for emergencies. So get started saving money, because in the event that one of these things happen, it's such a large large sum that it could force you to put your future self in a bad position. You might have to max out a credit card. You might have to take out a high interest loan. And these things seriously put you in a disadvantage compared to someone who has that cash stacked away somewhere where they could pull out of that without putting themselves down under. And then the second layer of redundancies is savings. It acts as a cushion or a safety net in the event that you get laid off. So savings acts as a runway. There was a study I read that says that most people just need 3 months of runway. I prefer to be on the higher end, closer to 6 months, because my job is a lot more volatile month to month. It's much more different from each other, and I'm also a very low risk tolerance individual. To figure out how much runway you need to know your monthly expenses. For example, if you spend $10,000 a month, then 3 months would be a $30,000 savings account. 6 months would be $60,000 savings account. And the final frontier of redundancies are retirement and investment accounts. These are different because they're not as liquid. To access a 401k or a Roth IRA early, you have to pay a 10% penalty fee on the money that you decide to take out. So there's not a lot of incentive to take that money out, but in the event that you seriously need it and you have no other option, that is still there for you to take out. Consider these 3 questions. If you suddenly had to pay for a $15,000 expense tomorrow as an emergency, what would you do? Next question. If you had no job and had $0 in the bank, what would you do? What is your plan B? Perhaps you can drive Uber. You can get a sales job. And then the last one, if you get laid off, what savings do you have? Do you have a runway? These are questions so that you can make your plan Bs and your plan Cs. And when shit hits the fan, because it will most likely will, unless you have the best luck in the entire world, then good job. But knowing the answers to these 3 questions will set you free of a ton of financial stress, because you know in the worst case scenario, you still have a plan, which moves us into money habit number 3. Now, it's really easy when we look at things that we want to buy. It's really easy to prioritize our present self, to think, I need that to be happy. It's going to make me feel good. But what's really hard is to consider your future self when you make that purchase, especially when it comes to large long-term purchases that need financing, such as a car or a house. Now, I've seen ads on the paper. Yes, I read the paper sometimes, where you can get a couch for $40 a month, 5 years, with a 29.99% APR. Now, at a first glance, it looks like a deal. $40 a month, that's not bad. But if you add it all up and put the interest rate on top of that, that couch ends up costing $5,000. Now, is your future self going to want to pay $5,000 for the couch? Those are just questions to run through when you think about buying something like that. When you think about upgrading the phone or the car or the laptop, like these things cost money for an extended amount of time. Another thing that I do is that I compare what the money would be worth if I invested it compared to what I have to pay for it, and then decide, is it worth it? So money habit number 3 is spending money with intention. Another thing that gets in the way of this is called mimetic desire. Now, it's when you have a want, but that want doesn't come from you internally. You want that because you saw someone else want that. For example, if you work in an office and your coworker starts talking about how they want to go travel to Japan because it's really cool. They want to try out the food there. They like the culture. They want to see the sights. And suddenly inside you, you also feel the urge to want to go there as well. But before that moment, you had no desire or interest in visiting Japan. This is where the social media comparison trap just attacks your very core as a being. It's ingrained in our system to want what other people have. So just knowing that this phenomenon exists is strong enough to raise your awareness of your desires. And the 4th money habit is something that will maximize your upside. We've talked about some things to protect your downside, but now we want to maximize your upside. How are we going to make more money? And this habit is something called the barbell method. So a barbell, when you lift weights, it's a bar and then it's heavy on one end, heavy on the other end. So this barbell method I read in a book called Anti-Fragile, and it basically states that you want to be at the extremes in your investments. If you are in the middle, then you get mediocre upside and mediocre downside. You're not really playing for asymmetrical gains here. You're not going to see an exponential difference in what you put in versus what you get out. Using the barbell method, our strategy for this is to have a bunch of safe things. One side is very safe. The majority of your assets are going to be very safe, like 80 to 90% of them. For us, that is cash, that is retirement accounts, that is semi-liquid assets that we could take out in the event of emergencies. And then on the other hand, you want to be very aggressive and very risky. Something that has high upside, but it's a little bit riskier. And for us, that is content creation, to invest money into our content creation, because we know that it has a higher upside. You could make a lot of money if you make content, but in the event that it doesn't work, then we fall upon our cash reserves, and that's why you can take the risk, because you also have a safety net. So in your life, what can you be more aggressive on, and then what can you be safer on? I know a lot of common investing advice says to invest in the S&P 500, and it's not bad advice. We invest in the S&P 500, but it's not all that we do. The S&P 500 is in a way very average and very mediocre, and it just follows along the trajectory that it goes on. But at no point in time can you get ridiculously rich from investing in the S&P 500. You just have average returns. So what is your barbell? Is it a side hustle that you're working on that has a high ceiling? Is it a business that you have always wanted to start? So the magic of the barbell method is that you can take risks and you have the ability to get exponential gains based on that risk, but you also have a huge safety net in the event that it doesn't work out. Which brings us to the fifth habit. If there's one way that you can set yourself up for the future, and it's to use compound interest to your advantage, not your disadvantage. Compound interest exists everywhere in our life. It exists in learning skills, relationships, wealth, debt. It exists everywhere. Now you want to use it to our advantage. In Atomic Habits, I know everyone references Atomic Habits. In Atomic Habits, there's this chart, and it has time on the x-axis, and I think either skill or outcome or something on the y-axis. But there's a line in the middle that if you do nothing at all and you remain the same, then the line is completely horizontal across. However, if you improve at a 1% rate every single day, you get 37 times the improvement in 1 year. But on the other hand, if you decrease by 1% every day, you quickly hit 0. For us, it's actually much more important to never hit 0 than it is to improve faster. Combined with using the barbell method, you now have a way where you can go up at a faster rate. Did that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. In the game of compound interest, you could lose much faster than you could gain because it works on time. The longer you stay in the game and you're on an upwards trajectory, the more compound interest is working for you. Therefore, having debt such as credit cards, college loans, anything that grows with an interest rate faster than you could make up, that is going to bring you down because you're going to spend more time paying that off constantly over and over and over before you have a chance to put money in to make compound interest work for you. So a good way to picture this is if you compare the college student that comes out of school $50,000 in debt, they're going to spend the next couple years of their life paying that off. Now compare that to the college student that gets to save $100 a month. The person saving $100 a month will be much farther ahead, and that's because of compound interest. So one thing we like to do is we like to, one, avoid really high interest debt in any way. Always pay off your statement balance on time. And two, because we have a 6-month-old baby now, we like to set her up for the future. We don't want her to be in debt when she's independent in her life. So we're saving $100 a month for her in a college education fund. And by the end of it, by the end of 18 years, if she decides to go to college, I think it's gonna have $35,000 or $40,000 in there, and that's good enough. That's a public college education. It's something. It's better than, so at the end of the day, the bank is winning when there's compound interest involved that works against you. So what I'm saying with this is just try not to get into any debt. Debt will bring you down, and even if you save money slowly, that's going to become so much more in the long run. So with everything we talked about, I hope you can use these habits and frameworks and mindsets to really change your life. So if you used to be like me and you think that saving money is gonna make you rich, then watch this video right here, because I had to learn this the really hard way. Saving money is not going to make you rich, but having a business using the principles in this video will. Yeah.